How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. I'm Sam Holcman, and the topic today is a 5-minute overview of ChatGPT. I'm sure that my audience has heard of this, and just a little bit of a summary here for those of you that are sort of wondering about this. I'm sure that you've heard about it. What's kind of amazing is that this whole thing started in November of 2022, which is not very long ago. And it's gotten some pretty big attention, to say the least. It's known as a large language model, if you hear the phrase LLM. And, of course, there's a bunch of technology behind it, but it sort of gobbles up and scrapes and steals and cajoles and borrows and everything else, words that are in sentences and images and all sorts of other things, and tries to make sense of that and sort of regurgitate it back to you. And I use the word regurgitate on purpose here. And so these language models that we're talking about can take data, text, audio, images, all sorts of other things, and use them to produce new stuff, so to speak. So the model takes chunks of text, text that are there, and then it tries to predict the next word that would make sense, and that's the way the thing works. So it's not intelligent, so to speak. It's pattern matching, and so what it looks for is what it considers to be a logical sequence of actions or words, just like I'm talking to you right now. So what it's doing is taking these words and saying, I think this word next, based on this context of the other words and what I've learned from a gazillion other things that I see out there, makes sense. Now, what makes ChatGPT different is in additional to the training it does on this data, and this is kind of controversial, it also uses what it calls reinforced learning from human feedback. Reinforced learning from human feedback. What does that mean? It means that human beings look at this information and make judgments, clarifications, additions, corrections to that information. And of course, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what you think about this, it can add even additional human bias in addition to the bias that may be there before. So this is something that we all have to think about when we look at these types of things. Back in a moment.
So you want to advance your career and see enterprise architecture as a key component to this advancement. Or you're an enterprise architect and you want to be more effective in addressing business and technology needs. You want to create highly effective solutions that deal with the ever-evolving changes in businesses and organizations. But accumulating the knowledge and certification to do that can be a challenge. That's why EACOE created a one-of-a-kind certification workshop for enterprise architects. The workshops will teach you proven step-by-step enterprise architecture techniques that you can use for addressing continuous business and organizational change, and give you the certification you need to progress in your career. Want to learn more? Then visit eacoe.org.
Thanks for coming back and joining me again. And so we were chatting about ChatGPT and the human reviewers and annotators and commentators of this information. And once again, that could have positive or negative types of consequences on this. So ChatGPT can write, it can edit, it can translate, these types of things. It can summarize, it can brainstorm, and of course a lot of people are looking at, in the technology area, of actually writing code, computer code, to be able to do this. Now let's take a look at some of the limitations. Those are the positive things there. I love this phrase that has been introduced. It's called hallucinations, meaning putting together things that are factually wrong. I like to call them mistakes, and the reason I call them mistakes is that's really what they are. All of a sudden, if we use that term, it would make a lot more sense when people see these things. The computer is not hallucinating. There's no such thing that's there. And so there's things that it's doing incorrectly, and therefore I would have to verify any output anyways. So if you think that you can go away from this and just walk away and say, well, here's a sentence it built, and here's some facts that are there, I can assure you that that's not the case. The other thing is, what's the information base? ChatGPT, as far as we know, is based on mid-2021 data. And this broadcast is a mid-2023, a couple of years past that. And so we have to look at it. Now, I can't say for sure that is 100% fact, but what we can say is that the bulk of the data has aged. And in the age that we're in right now, 24 months is an eternity plus 10% that's there. And so if you do pay more money for some of these things, in other words, there are premium versions of this particular product and others, lots of different other products that are out there, you can get a little bit more information. Memory limits. In other words, if you start interacting with this, there's a certain number of interactions before all of that information sort of like disappears. In other words, it's sort of like in the early days of Twitter, where there's a certain number of characters, and then it sort of like blows up on you. Same thing here. There's a certain memory limit that we have to look at. And of course, if you pay more money, you can get a little bit more, information there. And finally, for all of us, of course, the concept of privacy. Where is it getting this information? What is it keeping? Where is it? And we already know that there are a number of countries and actions being taken right now to address these things. And some companies are even banning the use of that because they're worried about proprietary information getting into these models, and all of a sudden that information is not proprietary anymore. And the bottom line is don't share sensitive information with these things, is an understatement. There are a number of competitors for these things. Google has one, Bing has one, open source, there's a few of those. And so there's lots of things out there. So I hope this little briefing for those of you that are wondering about this, basically it's a computer program that takes stuff and uses that using pattern type of recognition and tries to come up with things that may or may not be useful. Hopefully 51% of the time they are useful to those that are using it. But as always, caveat emptor, especially when it comes to this. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning into Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.